Have you ever said yes, then immediately felt that drop in your stomach, that quiet resentment, the exhaustion before you've even started? Have you ever wanted to say no, but didn't because you didn't want to disappoint anyone? Because conflict can be seen as difficult. If guilt shows up every time you try to protect your peace, this episode is definitely for you. Today we're talking about why saying no feels so hard, where that guilt really comes from, and how to begin setting healthy boundaries without losing your heart, your kindness, or your faith. If you're tired of feeling isolated and emotionally drained and just want peace, confidence, and healing, you're in the right place. Hey, I'm Rochelle, wife, mom, and your faith filled recovery sister. I've walked through addiction and heartbreak, but found strength and stability through a relationship with Jesus. If you're ready for real hope, renewed thoughts, and a life that finally feels balanced, grab your coffee, girl, and let's do this together. Hey friend, before we go any further, I want you to breathe with me for a second. Because if you're here, chances are you're not just learning about boundaries, you're needing them. You're tired of explaining yourself, tired of carrying everyone else's emotions, tired of saying yes while something inside you is quietly shutting down. This episode isn't about becoming cold or selfish. It's about learning how to protect your peace without abandoning yourself. For many women, especially women who've lived through trauma, addiction, unstable relationships, or abandonment, boundaries were never taught. We didn't learn it's okay to say no. We learned keep the peace, don't upset anyone, be grateful, and be easy to love. So naturally, boundaries don't feel safe. They feel kind of risky. When you say no, your nervous system doesn't think this is healthy. It thinks this could cost me connection. That's why guilt hits before logic does. That's why your body reacts before your mind catches up. This isn't weakness, it's simply survival conditioning. So, the connection between boundaries and self worth, let's just say there's something I had to learn myself the hard way. If you believe your values come from what you give, then saying no feels like you're failing. A lot of us learned that love was earned by being available, helpful, needed, or even agreeable. So when you start setting boundaries, it can feel like you're breaking some invisible rule, like you're suddenly too much and not enough at the same time. But boundaries don't mean you're changed who you are. They just mean you're finally listening to yourself. And what guilt is really about? This is where most of us women get stuck. But guilt doesn't always mean you're wrong. Often it means you're doing something unfamiliar. When you stop over explaining, when you stop rescuing, and when you stop managing everyone else's emotions, your system goes, whoa, this is not safe. And how do we stay safe? So guilt shows up to pull you back into what's familiar, even if what is familiar hurts. Growth almost always feels uncomfortable before it feels peaceful. And this part matters most to me, where boundaries aren't about controlling others. Boundaries are not about changing people. They're about being honest with yourself. And that could simply sound like, I can't do that anymore. That doesn't feel healthy for me. Or, I like this one. I need space right now. And here's the truth. No one prepares you for. When you set boundaries, some people will be uncomfortable, and that's okay. Not because you're wrong, but because they benefited from your lack of boundaries. And that doesn't make you selfish. It means you're waking up, you could say. So, let's take a look at some real life boundaries and what it actually looks like. We'll take it out of the theory for a minute. Because boundaries sound great until you're standing in the moment and your heart starts racing. This is usually where people freeze. So let's talk about what boundaries look like in real life, not the Facebook world version or Instagram, but the messy, uncomfortable, everyday version. Let's start with good old family. Maybe it's someone who expects access to you whenever they want it. You might understand this with the late calls, emotional dumping, cross lines followed by, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that." A healthy boundary might sound like, "I love you, but I'm not able to have this conversation right now." No arguing, defending, and definitely no explaining your entire past. They might not like it, and that doesn't make it wrong. Sometimes boundaries change family dynamics, and that doesn't mean you're disrespectful. It means you're choosing health. And then there's the good old ex or co parenting. This one can get heavy at times, I understand, because there's history, traumas, addiction, manipulation, because it all blurs lines. And maybe they text you when they're lonely. Maybe conversations drift into old emotional territory. And a good boundary here might sound like, "I'm only available to communicate about the kids," or "I'm not comfortable having this conversation." You don't own or owe access because of there's history. You don't owe emotional availability because someone wants it. Peace matters more than politeness. That's just in my opinion. And then it actually can happen with friends and friendships. Sometimes the hardest boundaries aren't with toxic people. They're with the people you care about the most. The friend who always needs you. The friend who doesn't notice when you're drowning. Or the friend who expects the old version of you. And a simple boundary might be like, "I don't have the capacity for this right now." And you know what? That doesn't make you a bad friend. It makes you an honest one. Healthy friendships adjust over time. Unhealthy ones will resist. And then for those with your church or faith spaces, this matters to say it out loud. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to say no to serving when you're depleted. God doesn't need you burnt out after all. He cares about your heart. A boundary might sound like, "This season, I need to focus on healing." That's not lack of faith, that's wisdom. And the most important one is with yourself. This might be the hardest boundary of all, and that's okay. Not overbooking, not saying yes when you already know the cost, not ignoring your body, the telltale signs, and not numbing out instead of resting. Sometimes, after all, the boundary isn't external, it's internal. And you know what? You can say, "I'm allowed to slow down. I don't need to earn rest. And I definitely don't need to prove anything today." So, let's try and normalize something, because when boundaries feel like they're backfiring, that can be complicated. Because sometimes when you set a boundary, things feel worse before they feel better. People will definitely push back, and then that guilt inside gets louder. The old patterns try to pull you back in. And you know what? That doesn't mean you did it wrong. It means the boundary is working. Your job isn't to manage their reaction. Your job is to stay grounded in your own truth. Because even Jesus stepped away. He rested, he withdrew, he didn't meet every demand. He probably disappointed people, and he didn't do it with any guilt. If boundaries were unloving, rest would be sinful, and it isn't. You can be kind and still say no. You can be loving and still have limits. You can choose peace without losing the compassion. And you know what, friend? I want you to sit with this question this week. Where am I saying yes out of fear instead of alignment? And what would it look like, just once, to pause before answering? You don't have to change everything. You just have to start listening. And as we wrap up here, learning boundaries isn't about building walls. It's about building a life you don't need to escape from. And if this feels hard, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're healing. And you know what? I'm really proud of you for being here, for doing this work, for choosing yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. So, I'll see you next week, and until then, take care of your heart. Hey Mama, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, would you take 30 seconds and share it with another single mom who could use a little hope and encouragement today? It might be exactly what she needs. And please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more women find the show. It truly lights me up to know this podcast is helping you grow closer to Jesus. All right, girl, I'll meet you back here next week for another episode. Until then, bye.